talk about.
Okay. Can you just tell me the story from the beginning when you found out that Joe got cancer?
Okay, well, see, when I first took him in, he was passing blood in his urine, and he didn't have insurance. They took him down for tests. They put the PICC line in, they drew blood. They did an ultrasound, and they knew something was wrong. And Joe didn't exactly figure out it was cancer, but Joe heard words that he had heard before, but he didn't know where. So Joe was looking him up on the internet, and he asked this girl, Ann, about him, and Ann started telling Joe that that usually leads to, points to cancer, the word terms that he heard. Joe didn't say nothing to me, and poor Joe, we went down and we tried to get help from everywhere. What do they call it? Social services. They denied Joe insurance. Joey lost his job and he lost his insurance because he couldn't go to work. He was so swelled up and everything. And then work called him back and let him come back for a few minutes, but he wasn't there not long enough to build up his insurance again. And then Obama come along, bless Obama's heart, and Obama put the insurance through. And it was a year later, and poor Joe by then had gone to almost stage 4, and he had 4 different types of cancer. And then on Valentine's Day of 2011, Joe come home and told me that he had cancer. We found out almost 1 year later to the day after the doctors wouldn't touch him. And I mean, it was, I prayed. I mean, I grew up, I was Catholic, but throughout the years I got away from religion. And it kind of turned me back to God when I was praying. And then it's like, God may have heard something, and he sent Obama, a complete stranger, to change a simple little law. And that little law is, because Joe was, face it, he was down death row. He was walking down Death Street, stage 4 of cancer. That's real bad. And then he had the 4 types he had, 3 of them they could kill with chemo, the other one they can't. And they didn't want to do radiation because he was so young, and they said with the chemo treatments that they gave him, it would be too much on him. So, but I mean, if it hadn't been for Obama changing that law, I wouldn't have Joe. And the pitiful thing is the hospital knew when they released him. They knew he had cancer.
Yeah. What do you remember the emotion that when you found out about Joe's
cancer, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I was getting ready to come here, and I was getting ready to walk out the door, and Joe had just come home, and Joe come in and he was crying. Then Joe went straight to the backyard. My husband ran outside, my son ran outside. My youngest boy come in and he started punching the walls and he's yelling, "Why God, why God?" And then Jesse told me that Joe had cancer. And
so your whole family?
The whole family, we all fell apart, everybody. I ran down in the basement, I don't know why. I didn't want to be upstairs, and I was scared to go outside and see Joe because I'd never seen my son cry before, and he's 24 years old now. Yeah, but and all because of one doctor, because my son didn't have insurance, is what I blame it on. Mm-hmm. And then they told us that he had a fractured testicle. And then throughout the time, I had to take Joe back through emergency for, like I told you before, I switched clothes, detergent. Mm-hmm. Joe broke out in big blisters from the chemo. So I took Joe in for that, and that doctor had asked Joe questions, how did that other problem turn out? And I mean, it was one mess after another, but the doctor had, when Joe got in touch with the surgeon and the cancer doctor, because, they did exploratory surgery. First, Joe lost a testicle, and then they found out it wasn't a testicle. That's when they found out it was the tumor. Mm-hmm. And that doctor told me and Joe that if the hospital would have called in a specialist, he would have been the one to come in. And they told my son that there was nobody to call. Mm-hmm. And they didn't give that kid anything. He was hurt and he couldn't even walk because he was so swollen down there. And I mean, they didn't do nothing. And then, the funny thing too, I haven't been to church since what? My dad passed away in 1979. Oh, 97. And that's the last time, you know, I went back to church. I mean, everything changed, everything. And Joe's doing pretty good, but you know, we got to watch him for 5 years. He goes in every 6 months for the full body scan, all because of one doctor.
Just one doctor?
Just one doctor. But then Obama come along, and I mean, there was a stranger. He didn't know us, you know, and I had been praying, and I didn't doubt God. I knew there was a God, but I just kind of gave up because I figured, you know, it's not like you're raised. I tell you God answers prayers. I thought, God, I've been praying and praying for something, and nothing happened. And then all of a sudden, I think it was about 3 weeks after Joe was told that he had cancer, for sure, and that law did go into effect. So they covered previous bills for the last 30 days that Joe had been racking up, because he racked up a few hospital bills.
When you found out that they wouldn't touch him because of the insurance, have you thought about losing him?
Well, yeah. And you know, my husband kept telling me, and it caused a lot of problems for us, because he kept telling me, you know, Donna, he said it could go the other way. We got to make plans. If we lose Joe, what are we going to do? And I told my husband, I'm not even thinking like that. And my husband said, Donna, quit being on cloud nine. Quit telling yourself he's going to be okay. He said, because it can go the other way. And I kept telling my husband, we got to believe that he's going to be okay. But that caused a lot of fights. And then when I would cry, Jesse would come up to me, and Jesse said, Mom, Joe's going to be okay. And see, and my husband kept hearing the boys talk about that. He's going to be, and my husband would tell the boys, don't tell your mom he's going to be okay. We could lose Joe. And Joe finally, you know, Joe's the one that walked up to me one day when I was crying, and he says, you know what, Mom, I can do this. Then he had another little downfall. His last week of chemo, his girlfriend was driving him for back and forth. She left on a Friday. My car was broke. So she said she picked Joe up Monday. She pulled out of my driveway Friday and never came back. He had been going with her for 6 years. I just work 8 houses down the street, so I kept looking out the door, looking to see where she was. And she never showed up, so I called Joe, and Joe said she won't answer her phone. So I called Beck, and Beck wouldn't answer the phone for me either. And I walked home, and I couldn't get my car started. And I went back up to work crying, and my girlfriend left work and drove Joe up for chemo. But Joe and I got in a fight that day because he said, Mom, I can't do this anymore. I said, Joe, what about it? We're going to be okay, you and I believe. I said, Joe, if you throw this chemo out, this is last week they were going for the kill. I said, if you throw this chemo out now, Joe, they're not going to do surgery. And Joe said, Mom, I'm done. He said, I can't go through this anymore. And then when I called my husband said, well, Donna, he's over 18, you can't make him go. So there I was going again, thinking I was going to lose Joe all over again. Well, we were so close to beating 3 of the cancers, but we couldn't beat the 4th one without surgery. But I knew you were going to make me cry.
That's okay. Sorry about that. So,
it's all right. I cried for 2 years.
Yeah. So, what is the emotional that you went through the whole thing?
Oh God, Joe was doing pretty good. Well, naturally his hair fell out. I used to have a real thick ponytail. My hair fell out. I lost 14 pounds. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. All I did was smoke and drink coffee. And then I kept, you know, I was reading on the internet, and that's one thing you don't want to do is read the internet when somebody close to you is sick, because it starts telling you what can happen. And I knew what could happen, but I was kind of in denial. I didn't want to believe that it would happen, because I kept thinking, no, God wouldn't do that to me. But I mean, the road that Joe went down, God just opened my eyes real wide, because there are people. I mean, because how would Obama know that, you know, Joe needed insurance? Did he know that there's a lot of people out there that need that? I mean, what made him do that? Pass that simple little law?
I don't know.
And then it's like, well, I was praying. Maybe God knew that Obama could do it. I mean, it changed me around because, like I said, I went to a lot of the churches that prayed for Joe, had him on the prayer list. Of course, I couldn't get Joey to go. But I went to a lot of churches and thanked the people for praying. And I went for the prayers for Joe. And right now, Joe's real heavy into that Relay for Life. He goes on the cancer walks. And they got some kind of, he's got a Camaro. And they got some kind of Camaro show going on May the 10th somewhere. Everybody's supposed to bring their Camaros. And there's a $25 fee or something like that to register your car. And they're going to have a 50-50 drawing to raise money for cancer.
So now he's giving back?
Yeah, so now he's right into all that stuff now. But you know, 24 years old, that's hard. Poor kid, he probably can't have any kids because they wouldn't treat him. Yeah, I mean, the cancer went everywhere. If that one doctor would have done it right, he caught Joe. See, because Joe was laying on the couch probably 2 days before I took him to the hospital. He was just laying on the couch, and I got a little 25-pound Jack Russell. And the dog jumped up on the couch and jumped on Joe's lap. And immediately when he jumped, Joe, you know, he jumped on the boy stuff area. Joe started hurting there, and he started swelling, and then he started passing blood. And we found out later what had happened is when the dog jumped on Joe, that's when the tumor exploded. I guess it just erupted and started leaking. And see, if it wouldn't have erupted, Joe probably wouldn't have had cancer as bad as he did, but through time it would have, because it just kept continuously growing. But see, if it hadn't have been for my dog, we never would have known that there was something wrong with him.
Really?
Yeah, because when we took him to the hospital, he was swelled and passing blood in the urine, and the doctors, you know, with no insurance, they wouldn't treat him. I mean, the doctor didn't even put his hands on him. He acted like Joe was just a piece of dirt or something. He didn't put gloves on, made no attempt to touch my son. But then when I brought Joey back, when I had changed the clothes soap and he broke out in them blisters, when I took Joe back to the hospital, the doctor come in and he walks up to Joe and he goes, "Hey, bud, how you doing?" and does that knuckle bump. And I thought, wait a minute, buddy. You wouldn't even talk to my son. You wouldn't even acknowledge my son. And I asked for something for pain for Joe back then, and he wouldn't give Joe nothing. He didn't want to talk to me. He wanted to talk to Joe. He just told Joe, "Buddy, you got a fractured testicle. There's nothing we can do." Yeah, when we went in there, he's asking Joe and knuckle bump him and all that. And he said, "Did you ever get," and he sat down, like the bed was here. He sat down and he put his arm up on Joe's leg, and I had enough. I looked at the guy. I said, I said, "That's my baby." He said, "What?" I said, "You turned my baby away a year ago." I said, "Look at my baby now." Joe didn't have any hair, no eyebrows, no eyelashes. He was going through chemo. And I said, "Joe, look how my baby changed since you last seen him. And you're going to come up here and be all buddies with him?" I said, "No, ain't going to work." And then every time I go, my mom, she's in, I forgot the name of the thing. My mom's in assisted living, and they take her to Wyandotte Hospital. And every time she goes to Wyandotte Hospital, they keep her in emergency, and they call us and we go, because, you know, she's got the start of dementia, so she don't mean to be bad or mean to forget anything. But when she's in there, my sister always was asking me, "Who's that guy standing in the hallway, staring in here?" And by the time I turned around, the guy was gone. And it turned out after 4 or 5 times, my sister said, "Now it's the doctor that treated Joe, or that wouldn't treat Joe, I'm sorry. He just comes and stands there like this and just stares at me." And it's, you know, you try to get over it, and you try to forgive, and you try to forget, but you can't. But see, he brings out the bad in me. But then Obama brought back the good. He got me back in church by passing a simple little law like that. It's like I said, it's like I was praying and praying and praying, and all of a sudden Obama, like an angel or somebody carried the word to Obama, let's put insurance in, Donna's son is sick. I don't know how, it's just, I don't know, it's a miracle somehow. I don't know how.